All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the technique for cutting things like parsley, cilantro, otherwise known as coriander, and other things you might want to chop up fine that you would use as a fresh garnish or as an ingredient that has that beautiful herbal flavor. So this is a bunch of cilantro, and the nice thing about cilantro is you can use the stems and the leaves, but it's sometimes a good idea to chop them separately because they each require a little bit of a different technique to some extent, and you want to make sure that the stems are, if you're going to use the stems, that they're really fine. So I usually like to keep the bunch as intact as possible. I've washed it, of course, and taken out any grungy bits that were in there, and now I've got the leaves here and the stems here, so I'm going to divide off the stems, and I'm going to put that in my mise en place bowl here for a moment to keep it out of the way. And then the basic idea behind cutting herbs like this is you want to scrunch them up. You want to make a kind of a bale of herbs where you roll them up and you kind of squish them down, and then you've got to get your hands back into that safe claw grip so that you can safely go at these herbs. But that's about as good as it gets, and so you're going to do a bit of a chop this way. So chop, chop, chop. There's a few stems in there, but that's okay. There we go. So once we get through the bulk of it like that, now we're going to shift to more of the pivoting chop like this, where you're going to anchor the tip of the blade on your cutting board, and you're going to go across it like this. And just move it back and do the same thing. And if it gets big enough, you can just go straight down and chop like that as well. And this is about where you decide, how coarse do you want it. If you want it to garnish the surface of a dish, you may want it a bit more intact. But in this case, I'm going to be prepping this to make some salsa, some Pico de Gallo, which is one of my favorite fresh salsas. It's essentially a salad made from cilantro, from some jalapeños, usually, and then from tomatoes and onions finely diced. And then you add an acid. You can either add a vinegar, or you can use lemon or lime juice, or a combination of those things. And that's your basic Pico de Gallo, and something that you can eat by the bowlful. It's the nice thing, it is a salad. If you don't add a ton of salt to it, which is another ingredient that you have to add, but you can minimize the salt so that you can have a larger portion size and eat it almost as a main course. When you're on a restrictive diet, say you're following a diet where you're living on smoothies or even just meal replacements, and you don't want to add extra calories, but you just have that need for some real food, that's one of the go-tos for me, is you make a Pico de Gallo, no oil in it, nothing with really any significant calories. The vegetables in a Pico de Gallo, when you add up the calories, probably takes as much energy for your body to digest that as it does from what you get out of it as far as calories. So it's one of those sort of nearly zero calorie cheats, if you will, when you're on a diet living on nothing but meal replacements, which I actually am right now for the next 3 weeks. I'm 1 week into it, and so I'm really looking forward to some fresh Pico de Gallo that I will eat without tortilla chips, or not on the side with a burrito. It's going to be basically in a bowl with a spoon, because in that case it becomes a really nice salad. So I want my cilantro really fine. I like to add a lot of it because there's a lot of goodness in cilantro. A lot of the very aromatic herbs actually also have medicinal properties that, not necessarily very well understood, but they've been used traditionally often for centuries. And they often are something you can consider just another way to add very clear wellness to your diet when you're looking to improve your diet. This would be one of those things that I would call a superfood. Cilantro. Love it. Normally I grow my own cilantro. It's actually really easy. I have a little arrow garden. I've got a whole bunch of them at home, and about this big. And that one, there's one that we reserve exclusively just for cilantro. So when we aren't growing it in the summer in our garden, which, it's only good when it's pretty new. If you leave them grow too big, they get kind of gangly and then they go to seed. But you just have a sort of habit of planting a few more cilantro seeds every couple of weeks throughout the whole summer. And then in the winter, then I use the hydroponics, and that way you prune your cilantro back and you're just taking those fresh sprouts as they come out, and it's wonderful. So I never go without cilantro. So there we go. I've chopped it up nicely. And we'll move on to the next step in our Pico de Gallo. And so as I promised, I was going to use the stems, but I've already put away the leaves that I've chopped up. And the stems, I may or may not want to put them into the same dish. The stems do have some texture that not everybody appreciates. And especially if you're eating them raw like you are in a salsa, then, maybe I don't really want to put all those stems in there. We'll see. I'll cut them up. So it's just the basic cutting technique. Again, always be mindful, safety first, that you have a claw grip, that your blade is tilted a little bit towards you so that is able to bump against your clawed hands. And then generally you want your middle finger to be that guide finger, but it depends on the situation. As long as you have one prominent knuckle that's going to bump the knife to give you that tactile sense of where your knife's located when you're working on a very fine chop. Because when you're working very fine, your fingers do have to be close, because you need the precision of having your fingers there as partly as a guide to the chop. If you're chopping like big chunks of something big, your fingers can be way back. It doesn't really matter. But when you're wanting to make a really fine chop like this, then your fingers are involved. So safety first every second. And while you're chopping, it's important to remember that it is a very mundane task on a certain level, but it's also a wonderful opportunity, since your digits are actually dependent on you being very focused. Anytime you're focused, you're actually, in a sense, in a state of meditation. So why not consider this one of your daily meditations? I've enjoyed the experience of cutting vegetables greatly when I started to think about it as a time for just kind of letting go of my daily worries and things, and focusing on my fingers and on the quality of the food that I'm producing. And so it is quite a soothing activity. The crunch, 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 and the sound of the blade going over the cutting board, and just the feeling that your muscles have learned a new skill that's now quite natural and rhythmic. There's a lot of things about it that make it a very relaxing activity, something that, you may realize that you like chopping vegetables so much that it becomes a bit of a passion, because it's a time to feel quite serene. It's It seems a bit odd to say that, but in fact, I think this is maybe one of the most calming activities that one can engage in. And that's why I think it's worth the time spending doing it, because for one thing, you'll save money making your own food, and you'll develop a new skill that can certainly be a blessing to others when you get good enough that people eat what you cook. And then, in turn, you're actually cooling off for the day. Maybe at the end of your day, when you feel a little exhausted, you'd rather sit in front of the TV and eat a bag of potato chips. Instead, staying upright and, doing this very light activity is something that might give you kind of a bit of a regeneration for the evening. And that's certainly going to contribute to the good digestion that you want for your meal you're preparing. And all of that just blends into making cutting vegetables sort of a sacred task. It's something that you do with joy instead of feeling like it's this drudgery. And that's why if you go to our refrigerator in most weeks, you'll find lots of vegetables have been cut up and put aside, stored so that we have, a few uses from them. And that's exactly what we're doing here. Okay, so we're going to cut into a pepper. This is a small pepper that is called a jalapeño. And just so that my Canadian friends know, it looks like jalapeno, but it's not. It's not a jalapeno. It's not a jalapeno. It's a jalapeño. Now, I apologize that my accent is still not probably very correct, but it's closer. It's closer to something we call a jalapeño than it is a jalapeno or a jalapeno. So this is a jalapeño. And they used to be reliably very hot. But one of the things that I've learned about jalapeños in the last few years is that they've gotten to be unreliably hot. And it's important because if you know everyone at the table really likes hot, spicy food, then you can be pretty liberal with the jalapeno. But if you have people who are very sensitive to hot spice, you want to make sure that you're not going to introduce excessive heat, or there's no turning back, right? There's no way to pull the heat out of it. It's really easy to add some heat to a dish, but it's really impossible to pull the heat out. So what I like to do when I start off, I've cut the top off, and I'd like to just make a cut through the base here, make sure it has a few seeds in it. The seeds are where most of the heat is going to be, and I'm going to give it a try. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a real one. That's a jalapeño. And so I have to think, okay, who's going to eat this Pico de Gallo? And will they appreciate all that heat? No, probably not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open her up and remove the seeds carefully. You can use your chef knife, but realistically, it's maybe a time for a paring knife. Safety first. So this is one way to do it. I wouldn't do this if I was processing quite a few, but one, no big deal. Otherwise, I'll show you a technique if you need to do quite a few. If you want to get the seeds out of quite a few, for one dish, then there's a quicker way to do it. But for now, put those seeds to the side because I'm not going to throw them away. I love hot food, so I'm going to make sure that that's available for my dish so I can add it in at the end or make a separate portion for myself. So now you have two nice, stable, flat pieces, and you can flatten them right out, and you can make strips, julienne size, style, and then turn them and line them up and chop, chop, chop. Chop, 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 chop. There we go. Another one. There, turn her around. The last couple ones you always slow down, be a little bit more careful. There we go, so that's one. Now let's do another one. Chop the end off. And then just like I showed you with the big pepper, you can run down like that. And now you have a visualization of you can see the seeds as they're, I'll do it backwards here. So you can go down like that, go right around that core with all those seeds. You just need to waste a little bit at the top here, or at least for now. You're not going to cut into that. And now you're left with that. And I just want to take that beautiful little spot at the end there. And that is, for me, the hot stuff. So now you have these nice flat plates, and you can line them up and there, that's pretty good. I didn't make the strips first, but I can give it a quick chop if I want to try to reduce any of those larger bits. That's fine. There we go. So we have a couple of jalapeños for our pico de gallo. All right, so we've got a couple tomatoes here, tomatoes if you will, and we're going to chop those up for our pico de gallo. The simplest thing to do to start would be to just get rid of the stemmy bit. There we go. Some would take out the core, even the seeds. I'm really averse to food wastage, and I like to keep just about everything that I can, because what's not food is going to be fiber. That's the way I kind of look at it. Not if it makes it taste gross, but something like this will be fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grip around the tomato like this and just go straight down. Nice to have a sharp knife with a tomato. Otherwise, you're going to be, working on your tomato like this, and it's going to be juicing as you're pushing. But having a sharp knife, again, this is a knife I've had for over 2 years, and it's never been sharpened because I am careful with the knife and I also hone it just about every time. And so this knife just, it slides through this tomato like it's made of butter, and it's not making any juice. So there we go. Just one nice slice each time. Good. So nice to have a sharp knife. And ideally what you want to be able to do, and it's sometimes not the easiest cut, but and you have to be very careful with your fingers as this is coming across, but you want to try to get another layer of the cut that way. And this is where my truly amateur skills often are challenged. But again, I believe that the main reason why I should be doing this is that I kind of feel like if a bumbler like me can actually eventually hack together something that others will eat and enjoy, then I probably have something to share, because maybe you feel like you're not willing to cook because you're a bumbler. Well, take heart. Take heart. So now I'm going to go back like this, and I'm aiming for quite a fine chop of my tomato. That's why it's taking a little bit longer than if it was just a rough chop. A rough chop could be done in 5 seconds, but when you want to get smaller bits, it's a little bit more challenging. There we go. Tomato, potato. Here we go. We're ready for our pico de gallo. These are some red onions that I prepped a while ago that are not quite where I need them to be for the pico de gallo. They are long strips like that. So I'm going to take out enough for my pico de gallo, and I'm going to chop these up fine. Okay. So I'm going to just they've lost their orderly state, so I'm going to try to line them up as best I can. And then I'm going to just do a kind of a pivot chop, maybe just downward chop. Don't want them flying everywhere. There we go, nice and fine. That's going to go right into my bowl. And while we're at it, I thought I would take out my set of nesting bowls This is probably one of the best things that you could invest in. I don't remember where these came from, but they're a set, and each one comes with a lid, so you can put food in there, put it in the fridge if you want. They take up quite a bit of space because they're round. I'd rather have mostly rectangular and square containers in the fridge, but still, when you've finished got a nice bowl of Pico de Gallo and you just want to keep it on hand so you can grab it and have it again quickly, it's nice to have these bowls with the lids. So there's 4 bowls, and the Pico de Gallo I make, it's not very big. I'm going to use this bowl here. Put these others to the side. And all my ingredients are now going to go into my bowl. Starting with my onions. Red onion, so very mild onion, chopped up nice and fine. There we go. And I'll retrieve my potatoes. There we go. And my cilantro and jalapeños. Okay, so I've got that all in here. This is part of how we prep vegetables every week. We prep stuff, and then when we say we're now making a Pico de Gallo, I have what I need in there, but I don't need it all, so I'll get a spoon and spoon out what I need. Here is my cilantro leaf. There we go. A couple of spoons of that. And some of my jalapeno. There we go. And I won't put the seedy bits in there to keep it from being too hot. So that's onion, tomato, cilantro, and jalapeno. Now what I need is some lemon juice. So I have a lemon squeezer. I would highly recommend one like this that has this bowl and a portion that you press. Those work really well. I vastly prefer that over this. For one thing, when you do this with your lemon, you've got to pick out all the seeds. It's a big pain. This, on the other hand, it squeezes, you pour the juice, you flip it up, you take out the seeds, and you rinse it. It's really super easy to use. So have a lemon here. There we go. Squeeze. Juice. Feed the compost monster. There we go. Okay. Good. And now I want to put in some salt. I always like to do it by the pinch. There we go. Very handy to have a container with salt. I'll give 3 nice pinches. There we go. You need some salt for a Pico de Gallo. And then just take my spoon, mix it all up. It takes a while for the Pico de Gallo to really, for the flavors to meld and for the enzymatic reactions in the vegetables you've all just cut up to start to act on the vegetables and release some of the really good flavors, the things that sort of are associated with the final ripening of the tomatoes and so on. But now we have this beautiful Pico de Gallo. It's not very juicy yet. If I wanted to, I could add a little vinegar. I'm going to taste it and see what it needs. A bit more salt. There we go. A couple pinches. Good. And by salting it, it's going to draw the water, the juices out of the vegetables as well. I don't want to be seen putting that spoon back in the dish there, so if it was just me and my wife, I might not worry about it. There we go, mix it all up. Another taste. I only had 1 lemon, but it needs some more acid. I'm going to give you one of my deep, dark secrets. Lemon, lime, they're used to give an acid to the food. That's what's in those kinds of fruits. They're acidic, right? And you could probably guess what the acid is. I mean, there's ascorbic acid, which is vitamin C, so that's one of the acids. But the main acid, really what you put the lemon and lime into food for, is for something known as citric acid. Citric acid is one of the most fundamental chemicals in the human body. It's actually in every cell. That's one of the things your body uses to make energy through what's called the citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle. There might be some old lights going off from high school chemistry or biology now, but in essence, citric acid is a natural substance that's in your body all the time, in every cell, and it's something that you're consuming all the time as well, especially when you consume citric or citrus fruits. So you can actually buy citric acid. The food industry knows all about this. They don't spend excessive money adding lemon and lime when they're primarily just seeking to add citric acid to the food, because that's what they're looking for, is the flavor that comes from that. It's a very well sensed acidic compound. Our taste buds just light up when they sense citric acid, even though it's not super acidic as such. It's not like putting hydrochloric acid in your food or something. It's a mild organic acid, and yet it's still got a very powerful acid flavor that your body recognizes, and it's actually, it's good for you kind of thing. So there's no harm in adding a little bit extra, especially if you're short on lemons and limes, or it's a time of year here in Canada where those are so expensive. I tend to use a lot more of this in this time of year, and when lemons are getting so expensive and limes that you kind of choke when you see the price tag. I think this is going to be more and more important as a food ingredient for the home cook, not just for the food industry, which has known about this all along, and they use it in just about everything. So the only caution is this is like, for some people, a lifetime supply. Costs maybe $5. I don't know. You buy it I bought this at an Indian food store in the Lower Mainland, and you can find it. It's easy to find. You get it from Amazon too. So citric acid, I would just take a tiny pinch, like a little pinch, maybe a little more than that, but it's very strong. So it's like salt. You can't take it away. You can always add more. So let's have another taste, see if there's enough acid in this. Oh yeah, bang on. So that's your basic pico de gallo. There are twists on this. Sometimes what I do is I soak some dried peppers, usually sweet dried peppers, ones that you can get from a Latino grocery store. Sometimes regular grocery stores, they're very inexpensive, and they have a wonderful rich flavor that they add, and so I sometimes will add some of those. You have to hydrate them first with some boiling water, usually, or hot water, and then usually put them in a blender and make sure they're fully liquefied before you put them in something like this. But it adds a nice base that you can do. So you can do that, or you can add some finely ground red pepper, more like paprika kind of pepper. The one I like to use is called Aleppo pepper. So you usually get that from Middle Eastern food stores, Aleppo pepper, and it is a bit hot. There's a hot and a not so hot variety. I usually like it with a little spice. If I'm going to add spice, that's a pretty safe way to add some spice. It doesn't tend to suddenly become so hot nobody could eat it. You add a little bit, you taste it, and about the point where more sensitive people are saying it's getting a bit hot is where you really feel that extra breadth of flavor from the dried pepper. So it's a really nice addition. But a basic pico de gallo doesn't need that. We've got everything we need. It's got the cilantro, the jalapeños, the red onion, the tomato, and then a source of acid, in this case 1 lemon and a bit of citric acid, and some salt to taste. And there you go, pico de gallo. It's basically salsa, but it's salad. You can just sit here and eat a bowl of this. That's one of the reasons why I don't add too much salt, because I don't want to eat like a bunch of salt. Like if I ate a whole container of store-bought salsa, it'd be like enough sodium to blow my head off. But when you make it this way, you have control over that. Your taste buds do get adapted to eating things that are less salty, so I would get used to that. It's not necessary to eat a lot of salt, so I'm not afraid of salt, but I don't want to add too much, especially if I'm going to eat a large portion of this. And because this month I'm living on meal replacements, and this is kind of like a cheat right here, but it's a nearly 0-calorie cheat. There's no starchy vegetables in this. There's no oils. There's nothing I've added with really any calories. I would say if I ate this whole bowl, there might be, if I was to, put it in my FitnessPal or whatever, 2 tomatoes, this much onion, blah, blah, blah. It might be, maybe it's 200 calories, but that's not necessarily the calories your body actually makes out of that. So when you eat a food like this, there's so much fiber that there's a good chance that you're not going to absorb 2/3 of the calories. And the few calories that are there, it might have taken more effort to digest this bowl of Pico de Gallo than those few calories you get. So this is probably like not really adding any additional calories, even if you ate the whole bowl of this. And if you find that the meal replacements alone are leaving you kind of empty, then this is certainly one of the things to consider, is making yourself a bowl of fresh salsa. That's usually something you add to a food as a garnish, but in fact, it's a salad. It's a really healthy salad. Go for it, eat it, and enjoy it.